Good afternoon and Happy New Year. Happy 2019. This is Debra V. Wilson. I'm in Birmingham for a few days. I decided to go to the West Midlands and bring in the new year. I needed to do some planning for 2019, and I thought this was the best place to do it. In addition to that, being in Birmingham, and the place I chose to be in Birmingham, I anticipated, and correctly so, that it would put me in a very pensive mood and quite reflective. And so this podcast, the first of the new year, I hope will reflect that. To reiterate, my work is centered and focused on understanding how civil society responds to national security models and how those responses impact the national security model, which is the collective security model for all. My focus would be, and this is not in alpha order, it's the UK, Israel, and Canada. And I'm going to be doing a lot of pausing and hemming and hawing because I want to make sure I'm discreet as well as appropriate. The reason why the subject is of interest to me is after the invasion of Iraq, extremism grew, and the perspective I saw it from was London, England, because I was going back and forth to London, England, approximately 3 to 4 times a year. I saw my activism change as well as the activism of many women, feminists, because I was based in feminist circles. I saw it change and to seeking to understand what this emerging phenomenon was, and also to understand the state's response to it. During that time, a special branch, when I came into the airport, Heathrow International Airport, overwhelmingly, that's where I flew in, Terminal 4, then Terminal 5, the expansion of Heathrow. I was asked repeatedly, now here I'm doing some editing, whenever I came in the country, I was queried about my research. It was not immigrations. I was always in public at the immigration's desk, but it was not an immigration officer. It was a special branch officer. They were curious about what I was seeing, and what I was doing with my research was I didn't understand what I was seeing in London, England. So I was going from organization to organization trying to piece together there seemed to be something electrifying, charging up, amping up activism after the invasion of Iraq, and I was trying to figure out what the correlation was. Was it just coincidental, or was it something more systemic? I began to realize after a time, after a fashion, that it was a response to the extremism that was coming out of, well, now people say Islamicist extremism, okay? And it was also civil society. So civil society was responding to the extremism, right? And then civil society was also simultaneously responding to the way the state was responding to it. So there were multiple moving pieces, and I found them quite complex. So the only way that I could understand what I experienced is quite complex, and these multiple moving pieces was I literally started going from organization to organization and literally telling people, can you help me understand your activism? I was trying to paint a picture. And my activism became focused on trying to understand how other activists, bodies of activism, were responding to extremism and the state's response to extremism. I don't know yet what I'm going to call this podcast, but I'm just going to keep going. One of the things that happened during this time is the threat level increased, and I'm going to post some YouTube videos from a former director of MI5 as well as a former employee of MI5, and I'm going to, if I can, edit them so there's only the pertinent piece, and if I can't do that, then I'll notate the section of the YouTube video that's applicable. And the point is, I want to illustrate that what happened after the invasion of Iraq in the United Kingdom. It was very confusing for me because I lived in the U.S. and the U.S. had the narrative of, and I'm paraphrasing, fight them over there so they don't come here, being the U.S. Fight them over there, meaning the Middle East, because as we know, Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. And so I think in the U.S., my opinion is the invasion of Iraq was a way to manage the grief and the rage of 9/11 for not just some in the state, but for some in the general public. But the interesting thing that happened is that post the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the threat level in Britain kept growing. It just kept growing. So I had this dual reality of going back to America where I lived and worked and my family and friends, and this ethos that permeated throughout the country as we got them over there, we stopped them over there so they don't get us here. And then I go back to the UK where I have friends and I've been going for decades, and I had all this energy and work that was invested in the country and they were getting us over here. And it was almost, excuse me, it was almost as if the existence was almost, for me, schizophrenic. Because at that time, social media wasn't what it is now. And I almost felt like either, both from the state perspective and individual people, that no one really realized what was happening in the UK and that no one cared. So there were all sorts of rumors going around about the state being overwhelmed, MI5. I'm talking about in civil society. And then that reverberated into this intense concern and focus around national security coming from some activist communities you wouldn't expect, such as, and it might be an assumption, an erroneous assumption, but nevertheless that you wouldn't expect such concern to come from, such as feminist communities, questioning what's happening, and are they aware that what we call now the hate preachers, the utterances of proposing violence, and in all of this, I know this is scattered and I'm sorry, in all of this I had special branch reaching out to me, asking me what I was seeing and what did I think about it. So I'm pretty sure this podcast isn't going to go where you think it's going to go. So what ended up happening is over for several years, and I've mentioned this before, for several years I was doing my research And I should say, in America, I had a career in business that I had to do a lot of research. That comes to me naturally, and I'm inclined to be quite analytical about experiencing the spaces in which I live in and occupy. Getting used to dealing with special branch on a regular basis had an interesting set of dynamics. I began to acquire an entirely new set of skills, and I don't know if I necessarily saw that, but other people saw it. And because I started, the more comfortable I got with talking with special branch, and comfortable is in quotes because I don't know if you ever dealt with them. It's a big quotes, comfortable. Sorry, but that's the reality. Comfortable, relatively speaking. Don't know if you've ever talked with them. Comfortable, in quotes. So I ended up attracting the attention of Israeli intelligence, Canadian intelligence, Israeli intelligence. I know where I attracted them. I know where that happened. Canadian intelligence, I don't have a clue where that happened. But nevertheless, I did. So I ended up with this skill set, and I ended up attracting these spies, and also because initially I was dealing with special branch, and also there's an MI5 chapter. So I ended up even attracting additional intelligence people here in the UK. So I ended up having conversations with very pro-Israelis, Jewish, I'm trying to be discreet. I ended up having very pro-Israeli conversations with Jews here in the UK, and in Chicago, which is where I used to live. And during the course of those conversations, those very pro-Israeli Jews started naming the skill set I now had. Again, I had always been prone toward research and analytical work, but I never saw myself as doing anything around national security. I don't want to be a spy. I don't want to be a counterterrorism police. But I didn't know there was a world of research, and I thought I was too left of center, and I thought, well, I naively thought, which is very odd because I have auditing in my background. I thought, well, what if I'm critical of the model? How's that going to help? Well, that's partially what auditors do. You analyze, and sometimes that means criticizing to improve. And it was I'm trying to be discreet here. It was from the very pro-Israeli Jewish people that, particularly a woman, I'm being discreet, that started naming the skill set I had, and she suggested I come to Israel, to visit Israel, to see what I thought about civil society there, and to see if a similar situation I would be comfortable in doing, analyzing national security model from the bottom up, like I was doing here in the UK, which was interesting because I didn't actually tell her anything about what I was doing here, but that like I said, I'm being discreet. That was many years ago. I'm 61 now. And it's been very recent. I'm tearing up. That I realized the skill set I got from Special Branch. I realized I had fear and mistrust of Special Branch. I didn't like the way some things were being done in this country, and nothing I said or did had any, no one says, okay, Debbie, thank you for telling us this. Now we at Special Branch and MI5 are going to change it because you said it. No, nothing like that ever happened. But what was the oddest thing in the world was these were all white men, and they were older, as was I, as am I, they wanted to hear my opinion. And if I thought was not working, they wanted to hear my opinion. They opened a space for me that I didn't even know existed. They opened a space for me to look at, as a feminist, left of center, Muslim, and you're talking context UK, Muslim, who is also still a practicing Catholic, who has very complex associations with some people in the Troubles. Some people from the IRA participated in saving my life. There were some people, mostly men of all stripes, and some of those men were in the IRA. So to be given this opportunity in this space to opine and discuss national security from the bottom-up perspective with special branch, I don't know. The thing about these folks, the special branch, and I imagine MI5, although I have had a couple of meetings with MI5, they weren't the most successful, but I did mention once before there was, our association hasn't always been an easy one, and they did reach out in 2011, and before that too, but in 2011 they did, when I was back in the country, they did reach out to talk. So I did say it's been an interesting journey. I've said it before. Well, in any case, I wanted to do this podcast because it's, I think it's very interesting because of the door that special branch opened for me. Because, okay, here I go. You're gonna see now I'm left of center. Because they're white, they're men, they do national security, and they're probably more likely right of center as opposed to left of center. And it's a good assumption to make they're probably straight. It validated me and put me in front of other people that would have never, ever happened. It validated my work product. I'm pausing to keep from crying. And because of that, it opened a world for me that I don't like, I adore. The analysis and the looking at national security modeling from a bottom-up perspective. The thing about special branch, you can't kind of go into their offices and say thank you. I continue to question what they do and how they do it when we become aware of it as private citizens. I continue to want the model to be respectful of persons and human rights in spaces and places. I continue to seek that we all need checks and balances and oversight. But I continue to be aware, and I'm bearing witness in 2019, that if it weren't for special branch, I would not have met people from CSIS, that's Canadian Security Intelligence Service. I probably wouldn't have met people from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP. I probably wouldn't have met people in Israel that I suspect were the Shabak. If it weren't for special branch, the all white men of Heathrow, that's what I used to call them, because I might have even been older than them, but black doesn't crack. I'm just saying. So, I looked younger those days, and I was still coloring my hair. So, and often they had gray hair. So, it's a way to own the space I'm in. It's a way to also bear witness to the fact that what the woman who introduced me to Israel here in London, necessity is the mother of invention, And just as there was a space for me here, that she thought I should look in Israel and to explore, to see if there might be a space that I was comfortable in, that I could be equally as productive in. The world is complicated. People that do national security work, spies, spy cops, spies, are a messy lot. They're not the easiest people to be around. You always want to watch your back. If you're a civilian, stay on the civilian side of the road. There's lots of other things I could say, but I'm trying to keep this podcast short. But nevertheless, the reality is, and I find great humor in it, I do, that if Special Branch hadn't validated, I should have said, as I corrected, my work. Because, you know, left or center, the fact that they paid attention to my work opened a world to me. So, I don't suppose I can go to the Met headquarters and ask Mr. Basu, Neil Basu, can I sit down and shake your hand? Probably no, huh? I'm just guessing. I probably can't do that. So, I'm doing this podcast to say there's opportunities out there. The greatest irony in the world that I find hysterical, didn't even know the opportunities existed, till some old white man from the Special Branch opened the door for me. I think that's absolutely brilliant. And I am forever grateful. And I'm still on the lookout for a place to house my research, and probably I'd like to find someone British as a supervisor, and then I need to work out whatever that's like, because I'd like to do some work and research in Canada and Israel. I suspect that the Israeli piece might be, because there's a whole history there around me that I'm not going into that. But I'm a civilian. They can do their state-to-state thing, but I very much would like to do some research. Israel reached out to me about looking at national security from a bottom-up perspective, and I think that'd be terribly exciting and terribly interesting. And I'm quite grateful to the Shabbat for some kindness they showed me in 2017. And so, Happy New Year, Happy 2019. And if you see someone you think is from Special Branch, don't hug them. They don't like that. Don't even try to stroke them on the hand. I tried to do that with one of them. Apparently they don't like that either. They have issues with being touched, so don't do that either. But know that even in these rigidly defined identities, it was freaking Special Branch. They're the ones that opened the door for me. And I stepped right through. Thank you very much. And this is Debra V. Wilson. And 2019, remember, don't hug anyone from Special Branch. Thank you.